So today we're looking at this unit here. It's non-cooling. So we're going to get in and do some diagnostics. We'll get back to you. Okay, we got it opened up. We got a partial frost pattern on the evaporator, so we'll clean that up and then we'll go in and see if we can find a leak. Okay, we got a pressure test in, and we cleaned off the evaporator because you want to start with a nice clean evaporator. You don't want to have ice build up on the evaporator. And as we were cleaning the evaporator, you can see that our pressure was dropping due to the leak, but as soon as we put steam on the evaporator, you can see the pressure jumped right up. And that's a direct relationship between pressure of gas and temperature. If you add temperature, you're going to add pressure. And if you add pressure, you're going to add temperature. And now you can see it's sort of cooling back off and the pressure's dropping. But that's normal to see from what we did here. By steaming that off, we actually heated the evaporator. And when we did that, we boosted the pressure. Yeah, that's a hit, buddy. Both meters confirmed. Super small leak, though. Okay, so we suspected more than one leak, so we pulled the unit. We're going to go in at the heat exchanger. Bingo. So we got a bad heat exchanger. And the refrigerant was actually dropping and going through the fridge fitting, through the hole in the back. And then that would actually cause the refrigerant just to leak a little bit down into the back wall and set off our detectors. And that's why we thought we had a super small leak, but we couldn't find it with the bubbles and we couldn't pinpoint it, so we pulled the unit and there we go. So just because the leak is in one spot, you could detect it in another. So again, big picture. Okay, so as you can see, that's where our leak originated. This actually had been sweating quite a bit, and then basically caused little tiny pinholes, very, very small, minute microscopic holes in the heat exchanger. So we're pulling the evaporator and putting a new heat exchanger in, and we'll get back to you. Something to keep note of whenever you see this type of Armaflex on the heat exchangers or suction lines, what can happen is it can actually trap moisture inside and just cause it a nice little environment for that green death to happen, and actually will rot out the heat exchanger or the suction line. So it's not the best situation. I'd like to have a tightly wrapped pipe, and this suction line's very small and there's so much extra room in there that it just builds water up, and then if it's sealed up at the bottom, it actually can just fill this up with water and just sit in there. We got our heat protection in place, just ready to braze in that evaporator. So we got the Shutterweld heat shield and some hot block just to protect that aluminum to copper. And we're going to be brazing right above it, so we don't want to take a chance of causing a leak there. So we'll get that on there and braze it up. You got it. There you go, solder weld, 15% silver coming in clutch, runs like butter. Okay, so we got the new evaporator in, new heat exchanger, pressure test is in, new dryer, and it's looking a lot better, that's for sure. So we're just going to let that run for 10 minutes or so and just make sure that it still flat lines. Okay, I'm happy with that pressure test. It's a couple little fluctuations in there, but definitely no losses. That's just temperature compensation, I believe. So I think we're good with that. We're gonna get it back in its hole and get the evacuation underway. Okay, we got our evacuation going. Get the fuel piece pump on, gas ballast closed, Appion hoses, and our Blueback Pro. And we're pulling down. So leave that on there and see where we get to. Okay, so we're getting down there. We're down about 635, 637. And it's going to bounce around a little bit as it pulls any kind of refrigerant that could have been left in the oil, or any kind of moisture that may have been in there. With that suction line leaking, it can tend to pull more moisture in the system, so we expect to see it bounce around a little bit and take a little longer to come down. In a perfect situation, you want to have your micron gauge as far away from your vacuum hose as possible, but in this case here, the access to the dryer is back in behind those panels, and for us to have it installed and running, we pull our vacuum and have our gauge at our core removing tool. Again, that's not best practice, but that's what we have to work with, so we do. We just make sure that we pull it extra deep to be sure that we're getting a proper vacuum on the complete system. But that's not a sign of the true vacuum. The true vacuum would be if you had your gauge on the high side in behind those panels. Okay, so we're getting down there. We're coming down to 470. We're going to get her down below 400, do a decay test, and put some gas to it if it passes. So we're just going to do a startup on this, so we're going to wait for that compressor to kick on. That flash gas right there. So it's pretty cool to see the refrigerant boiling, flowing through the evaporator. It's one of the best parts about startup, is to see that flow. Okay, so we're going to go up and monitor the pressures, and things are looking pretty promising from what I'm seeing here. Okay, so we got a good frost pattern on our evaporator. Things are looking good there. Our pressures are looking good. Want to probably achieve around 0 psi, but it's still warm evaporator, so I expect to see it just be a little bit higher. We'll wait around and see how that stabilizes after running for a while, but I think this is a win. So we'll get things wrapped up here, get that evaporator covered back on, proper airflow, things like that, and if all good, we'll be out of here.